All right, so kind of back to the story. Uh, so I was with my grandpa, and I remember like we were driving to, or my grandpa was driving me to get something to eat. But I remember earlier that day I'd asked my grandma. I was like, "Grandma, can I get some money, some extra money?" And my grandpa was like, "Don't give him any money." And my grandma was like, "Why?" And he's like, "You don't give him any handouts. It enables him. Don't give him any handouts." And but my grandma gave me money anyways. She hid it. She snuck it to me. My grandma always gives me money, and my grandpa never knew that, but my grandma would always give me money, and my grandpa would be like, "No, no handouts, no handouts." And again, when I was a Marxist, communist, I wanted to believe it was due to Darwinism, and the reason why was because the grandpa isn't certain of his lineage, because he's not certain of his genes being the same as his grandson, as certain as the grandma. But again, part of the reason why I wanted to believe in Darwinism is because I wanted to dismantle Christianity and religion, and I wanted to believe it was religion is just an epiphenomena of Darwinism. And that's why, religions are against homosexuality, because homosexuality is not good for genes, so on and so forth, right? Because you can't have babies if you're homosexual. But my point is, my grandpa's like, "Don't give him any money, Gloria," that's my grandma, "because that's just enabling him. Don't give him any handouts." So I remember me and my grandpa, we got in an argument again. And I was like, "Grandpa, listen, I do not think that you helped my situation, because I discovered the theory of everything. I'm not just a lazy bum like my grandpa wanted to think. I was working every day on the quadrant model, the theory of everything, possibly the greatest theory ever discovered. Actually, not possibly, it is the greatest theory ever discovered. It's the most important theory ever discovered, and I'm working on it 24/7. So I'm telling my grandpa, you did not help the situation. But my grandpa didn't believe the quadrant model. My grandpa's like, "There's no evidence that my grandpa's like, "The theory of everything is energy." And again, this is another thing about my grandpa, is he didn't believe in Christianity, really. He didn't believe in Islam. Because, I asked my grandpa what he thought about Islam, and he'd be like, "Well, they still personalize God." But my grandpa would be like, "God is energy. And to personalize, that's dualistic software." My grandpa would be like, that's the idea that there's a separate God, but really there is no separation. Everything is one energy event. So yes, you are God in the sense that you are a wave in the ocean. You are not God because God is the ocean, but you are a wave in the ocean. And really you just want to align with the flow. But yes, if you do get in the flow, you can get inspiration and stuff. My grandpa thought that the people who wrote the Bible were, a lot of it was written by inspired people who were in the flow. And the same thing with the Quran, but my grandpa didn't believe in a separate God. My grandpa, he did it. He was very naturalistic. He believed in evolution, but not in Darwinian evolution. He believed that, like Aurobindo says, that there's that the universe is, that energy is geared toward complexification and toward the movement toward the omega point and increased complexification and evolution. But he didn't think that. Like, I'm telling him, "Grandpa, the quadrant model is the theory of everything. Everything is based around the quadrant pattern." But he didn't believe that. He didn't understand that. And he couldn't check because he didn't know how to use the Facebook to look at my stuff. So he just completely dismissed my stuff because, in my opinion, he just had a false idea about reality. He didn't realize that we're living in a quadrant matrix. My grandpa didn't know that. So my grandpa's trying to teach me. I'm trying to tell him, "Grandpa, I discovered the theory of everything. I'm not asking for handouts. What would be helpful is if you can support me, if mom and dad, if you can get mom, because your whole thing of make Ryan independent, he just wants handouts. This is just his ego strategy to try to stay dependent on his parents because he doesn't have a strong enough ego to become independent. This is what he's doing. It's just manipulation." No, I discovered the theory of everything. I wasn't trying to manipulate things, dude. You could have freaking helped, but at the same time, it's true. Like, I was a Marxist, so I'm glad I was persecuted, but and I think that this made me even more into a Marxist when he's doing this stuff. So I was like, I just thought my grandpa was a white supremacist. He's against handouts and stuff. So, but I'm trying to tell my grandpa, if you guys would have just helped me, then I first off, if they were the ones who tried to force me to be independent, forced me to go to Kauai, had me hurt my leg so I couldn't play basketball. If I was playing basketball and making my rap music, because I can only make rap music when I'm playing basketball and nervous, then I would have been rich and famous. I would have, if they would have helped me get my basketball videos, that's all I needed was my basketball videos so I could study my shot. I would have fixed my shot earlier. I would have fixed all this stuff earlier. and I would have been gotten a basketball. I would have gotten a rap. I would have been fine if they wouldn't have tried so hard to make me independent. But my grandpa said, well, your mom and dad misinterpreted what I taught. I didn't teach them to completely throw you to the side, but he did, though. So his teachings, I think, influenced my parents to throw me to the side. So I'm trying to tell my grandpa, like, Grandpa, your teachings did not help. So again, my grandpa got upset with me, and he stopped teaching me for years again. He stopped teaching me for years. And I needed him to teach me because he confused me. Again, I didn't know what dualistic software was. He confused me. So he's telling me, oh, Ryan, just transcend dualistic software, transcend the ego. But he didn't teach. So when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, okay, you want me to believe in race mixing because he didn't really teach me well enough. So I'm confused. What does it mean to transcend the ego? And that's why I was so confused. I was like, Grandpa, how could you want to transcend the ego and be for transcending dualistic consciousness, but not be for welfare? I was like, if you transcend the ego, wouldn't that mean that you want to give to the poor? And like, but really, again, I saw myself as Jewish, and really, I just wanted to destroy white people, but I didn't realize that was my ego. And I hadn't transcended the ego. I wasn't in the flow. But I didn't know that at the time. So I'm like, I was just so confused. I was like, Grandpa, I think that you just don't understand, Grandpa. I'm like, if you want to transcend the ego, then yes, you should be for welfare. But my grandpa was not for welfare. He's like, that's just handouts, and it doesn't necessarily help people. It just enables people and stuff. And he's making me into like, trying to make me into a parasite. And I remember I was driving with my grandpa, and we were talking, and I don't know how it was brought up, but we were talking about the Jews in Egypt. And again, I was always a Marxist communist, and I wanted to see the Jews as the good guys, and the black people as the good guys, and the white people, the slave masters, as the evil oppressors and they're just the evil. They're the devils of the world, and they oppress the poor people of color and the Jews are people of color. And that's the way I wanted to see reality. But I asked my grandpa like what he thought about it, and my grandpa was like, yeah, the Jews weren't ready to leave slavery. He was like, the Jews, they're stuck in dualistic software, and they weren't ready to leave slavery. And he basically was saying, like kind of like Kanye West said, like, it's a choice. Slavery is a choice, but not necessarily because my grandpa doesn't want to be judgmental, but he's saying that if you're expressing dualistic software, you put yourself in positions that put you in slavery and maintain slavery. And my grandpa was saying he didn't think the Jews were ready to leave slavery. So he was surprised, that they even left slavery. And again, I was like, oh, you're just a white supremacist. You blame the victim. The Jews wanted slavery. Oh, okay, you're just a white supremacist. You're a Nazi. That's the way I always saw my grandpa. But now I recognize, yeah, maybe my grandpa did understand, because I remember I went to a Chabad, and basically the Chabad rabbi was saying the same thing. He was like, yeah, a lot of the Jews who came out of Egypt, actually a lot of them were Egyptians, and that's where a lot of the communists come from people who weren't really Jews, but who moved into the Judaism, and he's basically victim blaming. And I always saw Chabad, I always saw the Orthodox and religious Jews as white supremacists, and I always saw my grandpa's white supremacists. But now I understand more. Now I'm like, okay, yes, because I always hated it. I was like, you guys are just victim blamers, white supremacists, victim blamers. But now I understand. Yes, sometimes the victim. My grandpa would say the victim doesn't take it's not the victim's fault, but my grandpa would say it's the software's fault, the software of the victim. But my grandpa would say the person can transcend his software. He can upgrade his software toward the flow. But my grandpa thought that the Jews, he said, perhaps by nature, he doesn't want it, but my grandpa says, because my grandpa's full of contradictions, right? So he would say that he doesn't want to say Jews are by nature this way, because as an existentialist, he wants to say, and I figured this out later, he wants to say that you don't ever blame your software or don't ever blame things like genetics, like, oh, I can't do it because I'm a Jew, or oh, I can't do it because I'm a woman. You just want to transcend the ego and just go all out. My grandpa would say, just go all out, just work hard, just, and not blame don't be like, oh, it's because of my genetics, I'm by nature, I'm this way. Or even my grandpa would say, don't be like, oh, I have a 130 IQ, I'm a genius, because my grandpa would say, then that might make you lazy and you might not work as hard. So as an existentialist, my grandpa doesn't want to blame stuff. But at the same time, my grandpa would say, if you're in the flow, you can discern things. And my grandpa said, perhaps Jews by nature are, got themselves enslaved due to their nature. It's a possibility that they were expressing dualistic software. But again, we don't know that. It could be other factors. It could be environmental factors and stuff. If you're in the flow, you can discern this, my grandpa would say. But again, I was like, dude, you're just a victim blamer. You're saying that the Jews wanted slavery, or that, the Jews weren't even ready to leave slavery. And you're ready. But even the Bible kind of says that, right? They wandered through the desert for 40 years. They wanted to go back and stuff. But again, I didn't like the Bible. I thought the Bible was white supremacist. I wanted to destroy religion, because I was like, I'll just give an example of that. I'll get more into that later. But I just wanted to destroy religion, because I was like, yeah, religion, it was written by patriarchal men and tribal people, and there's an impetus in humans to want to be conservative because that maintains a tribe. So humans have a tendency toward victim blaming. So even the Jews, they went through a lot of hardships and they blame themselves. But I said that that's a tendency innate in humans to blame themselves or to blame the victim, because that helps to maintain tribal unities, and that throughout history helped to maintain the tribe. So again, I was taking on evolutionary Darwinian perspective in order to try to undermine religion, because I saw religion as white supremacist and I wanted race mixing. I wanted to destroy the white race. So, but so my grandpa's teaching me this stuff. And then I remember, okay, so we got in an argument, and again, I'm like, Grandpa, because at this point, I think I wasn't a Marxist anymore necessarily. I was moving more toward the right wing, but I'm like, Grandpa, I'm not a parasite like you want to think. I discovered the theory of everything. Quit trying to put me in the category of some loser who wants handouts. I'm not a loser who wants handouts. I discovered the theory of everything. And I was like, and if you would help me, I'd be doing professional basketball. I'd be doing professional rap. If you guys would just give me some support. If you just, and rather than getting me hurt, you end up hurting my leg. And then the other thing that my grandpa started doing is he started to be like, he was reading this book, and it was a book by this lady. I forget her name, like Linda Baker. I forget her name. But her whole thing was like, let go of your story. Let go of your story. And my grandpa's like, yeah, Ryan, just let go of your story about the past, about the shoot-away machine. Because I would tell my grandpa, like, if it wasn't for my dad with the shoot-away machine, none of this stuff would have happened. Like, it's not my fault. Now, can we get dad to talk to me again? But my grandpa wanted to blame me. I always saw him as a victim blamer. He didn't want to believe it was a shoot-away machine. My grandpa was like, well, Ryan, if you were in the flow, it wouldn't have mattered if you had the shoot-away machine. You still would have been fine if you were in the flow. Again, I'm like, dude, you're a victim blamer. It was the shoot-away machine. You don't know basketball. You don't know that it's all about how you move into shots. If you're picking the ball off a rack, it's going to mess up your shot. So I'm trying to tell him, like, but he's a victim blamer. And that's why I hated my grandpa. I hated him. So I'm like, dude, Grandpa. He's dead now. But, so I actually, I hated him. But at the same time, I have a lot of respect for him because he taught me so much stuff. And, he might not have understood the situation. And that's fine. But I was so upset with him. I'm like, dude, Grandpa, it would be helpful if you could just get mom and dad, influence mom and dad to talk to me again, to see me, because they hadn't seen me for 15 years. But my grandpa's like, oh, if you had a job and you were working hard and then you would be out of ally enemy software, and then you might be ready for your mom and dad to talk to you. But I'm like, Grandpa, listen, I discovered the theory of everything. Can you just get mom and dad to talk to me? And in my mind, I'm like, maybe if they would talk to me, maybe I would get a job. Maybe you guys could help me get the quadrant stuff out, and then I would get a job. Or just, why are you guys isolating me? Why are you doing this to me, But my grandpa, I feel, like I said, I always felt like my grandpa made things 1,000 times worse. So I'm trying to, but anyways, I got in an argument with my grandpa about this, and my grandpa's like, okay, I'm not going to teach you anymore. So again, for years, my grandpa didn't teach me, and it was terrible because he needed to teach me. I was confused. He didn't teach me enough. He left me at a dangerous level of understanding. There's a level of understanding that's dangerous because he taught me just enough to where I didn't know very much, but also just enough to where I knew enough, but I was just confused, and it could make me crazy. If you don't teach someone enough, he didn't get me to the level of understanding where I would be safe mentally, I was just at that point confused because I'm like, okay, transcend dualistic software, I don't know what that means. Transcend the ego, I don't know what that means, but I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to make you happy, Grandpa. So it's just a bad situation. And again, like my grandpa's whole thing of, well, just let go of your stories, Ryan. Just let go of your stories and just go, you don't have to just go all out and just play basketball and just play. But I'm like, dude, you guys hurt my leg. Well, just let go of your stories. Let go of your excuses. Don't blame. Don't complain. But the fact of the matter is, that's why I was always a communist Marxist. Like, this is my empathy for communist Marxists. I'm like, dude, if you guys would just help me, then maybe I wouldn't be hurt in this first place. Maybe, so that's what, and like I said, when I'll get more to that later. But my point is, I wanted help. I wanted to see my mom and dad. I wanted to do all that. And then when I would call my mom barely would answer because she would always have me blocked. But my mom would be like, your dad's never going to talk to you. You can't make things happen. Because again, she's stuck in the past. She's stuck in the time with the shooting machine. You can't make things happen, Ryan. You can't force things. You can't always get your way. Because when I wanted to help with my shot with the shoot-away machine, my mom would always say, my grandpa come in, he's like, Ryan, you can't get your way. If your dad decides not to help you, you can't always get your way. So my mom's still stuck in that. You can't get your way, Ryan. But they overdid it. They didn't need to continue this. I discovered the theory of everything. It could have been, everything could have been wonderful. They could have been like, wow, you discovered the theory of everything, Ryan. Let's help you. This is amazing. We're proud of you. And I could have been accelerating and excelling. Hey, Ryan, you want basketball videos of when you were younger? Maybe we'll support you, and that will help you. Even my grandpa said that could help me. And I would have fixed my shot earlier, and I would have done all this stuff. And I would have, studied the swag flow earlier. I didn't have the swag flow at the time. I wanted to study this stuff. But basically, I was isolated and alienated. So, it's terrible, but so I'm trying to, but then my grandpa stopped teaching me. At that point, I'm just confused. But again, my grandpa's moving more toward right wing because I'm like, so I'm like trying to be more right wing because I'm like, maybe my grandpa will like me more. And I do remember it was about that at that time when the fires hit Malibu, because I was going all around Malibu trying to get the Quadrant model out, and I was going everywhere. So when the fires hit, I was happy. I was like, good, fuck everybody. I'm trying to get the Quadrant model out, and everyone's ignoring me. So fuck everybody. Good, fires. I want more fires. So the fires hit. And I went to visit my grandpa, but again, my grandpa wasn't teaching me at this time. But I remember when I was staying with my grandpa for a little bit, my grandpa started teaching me some things that were interesting. So one thing is like I said, I was like, so grandpa, what is your explanation of why women want alpha males? I know really what women want is they want the swag flow. Because when I had the swag flow, I had fan clubs of girls. And I know what the swag flow is, but I'm not going to describe what that is. But I asked my grandpa, why is it that women go for the alpha males? Like, there's studies that like if a man is leaning up against a wall and a woman's talking to him and other women see, then they become attracted to that man. And they can't help it because their brains, in the Darwinian explanation, is because their brains are telling them, wow, that woman likes him. He must have sexy genes. And if that woman likes him, then he will reproduce with that woman and he will spread his genes. So I should like him too because he has genes that will be spread a lot. And I want to have sons that will have his genes that are sexy genes that will be spread a lot. Now, they don't rationally think this, but instinctually. So then once the one woman sees the one guy leaning up against the wall, and once the woman over there sees this woman talking to this guy who's leaning against the wall, now she wants to talk to him. Now all these women want to talk to him. And now the man gets a harem. And that's why women end up in harems. Like even my ex-girlfriend, she had a baby daddy from a guy who already had a baby. And a lot of women would be like, oh, because what women say and what women do are different. They might be like, I don't want to have a baby. Oh, you guys talk about you don't want to have a woman who has a daughter. Well, we don't want to have a man who has a daughter. But that's not true. Women go for men who have daughters. And they like that. Because in the Darwinian explanation, it's because they see a man who has a daughter and they think, oh, sexy genes. This man already has reproduced. That means that he has sexy genes. And I want to have sons that have sexy genes that will reproduce more. That's the Darwinian explanation. That's what I learned about at UC San Diego. And I like that explanation. And again, I like these explanations because I like the Darwinian explanations because they were anti-religion. They were anti-spiritual. They were materialistic. And I like that because I wanted to destroy religion because I saw religion as white supremacist. So, but at this time, like I said, I was moving more toward the right wing and I was trying to understand my grandpa's spiritual teachings. So I asked my grandpa, I was like, Grandpa, what is your explanation of why the women will all like the one guy who's leaning up against the wall with the sexy genes like that? Whereas men on the opposite angle, they don't want a woman who has a lot of men. They want a woman who is, as they say, not promiscuous because that ensures his genetic, that he will, send his genes in the next generations. That's what I talked about on INTP Central. And I was like, that's why in the Bible they're against promiscuity of women. That's why, like I said, I thought that religion was just an epiphenomenon of Darwinism. And I thought that that's why throughout history they had women, they upheld women as, the most virtuous women as the ones who are virgins. So my grandpa was like, so I asked him, why is it, what is your explanation other than the Darwinian explanation? Because I thought the Darwinian explanation made sense. But even though like I knew the quadrant model and I knew that evolution was false because it definitely wasn't random, but at the same time I was thinking we're in a matrix and maybe within the matrix Darwinism still plays a role because everything's an illusion anyways. So Darwinism, the explanation would be like Satan makes the materialistic way of viewing things palpable and understandable, because Satan wants, he can manipulate reality to make people believe that, and he might, make reality that way in order to, give people that materialistic, to allow people to be satisfied with materialistic explanations. It's like a battle between Satan and God. And like when I was talking to this Hare Krishna guy, he was saying like, yeah, Krishna allows the people who have materialistic explanations to find evidence for their beliefs, because Krishna is very merciful, and he's even merciful to the materialists. But he also gives the spiritualists evidence for their beliefs as well. So, I kind of understood that. But I was asking my grandpa, like, what is your explanation that's not a Darwinian explanation of why women are like that and why men are like that? My grandpa was like, it's software. So my grandpa said, the woman wants the man who has other women, because the way that a woman, he said it could be just superior, inferior software. Now, this is when he starts to teach me about the software. So I start to understand. But again, he wasn't teaching me at all at this point. But this one day he did teach me this. He's like, it could just be software. And he was saying like, so there's different levels of software. In this case, it would be superior, inferior software, but you can upgrade beyond that. But he was saying that and this superior, inferior isn't necessarily bad. My grandpa would say you move through stages, and it's appropriate at a certain time in someone's life to have superior, inferior software so that he can build his ego in order to ultimately transcend the ego to the flow. But my grandpa was saying, okay, yes, it could just, in this case, it could just be, there's other explanations, but in this case, if a woman is expressing superior, inferior software, if she's at that level, then she wants a man who has quote unquote sex, who is sexy, who other women like, because yes, she wants to have superior offspring so that she can be superior. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with because of her instinctual desire for genes, or, for a Darwinian instinctual proclivity toward the best genes. And also another explanation my grandpa gave was like, in terms of, because I asked him, okay, well then why does the lion kill the lion cubs of the lion who he killed? So the lion kills his enemy lion who had babies with this female lioness. He kills those cubs so that his cubs can be supreme, and the enemy's cubs will be dead. So I was like, why does the lion do that? And my grandpa was like, well, it also, in that case, it could be because lions don't upgrade their software. But in that case, my grandpa was saying it's the anti-entropic reordering function. In terms of, my grandpa said that life is the anti-entropic reordering function, and life and energy moves toward more complexification and higher levels of complexity and higher levels of synergy. And in this case, the lion with the highest level of synergy, he has more babies that are more synergistic. But again, I thought that was just a white supremacist idea. I liked the Darwinian ideas when I was a materialist Marxist, because I didn't like the spiritual ideas, because I thought spirituality was white supremacy. And like my grandpa's whole idea of anti-entropic life as an anti-entropic reordering function, he's like, yeah, just work hard and just be a part of synergy. And I'm like, that's white supremacy. Like, work hard, be a part of synergy. I liked degeneracy. I wanted to see everything crumble. I was a Shiva worshiper. I wanted destruction. I wanted to believe in Darwinism and Marxism and materialism, and not everything is just synergy, energy events, and we're moving toward complexification. I was like, that's white supremacy, and I wanted to destroy white people. But at this point, I started to listen more, and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to move more to my grandpa's teachings, and I'm starting to understand. Okay, so what my grandpa was trying to say is, and now I understand this, but at the time I wasn't completely clear about this. But what my grandpa was trying to say is, humans are not animals. Humans can upgrade their software, so humans are not necessarily run by instincts. So there are women who expressing superior, inferior software might be inclined to having sex with that man who has a lot of women. But my grandpa would say, but there's other women who upgrade their software to the flow, and they don't have to be enslaved by those more primitive levels of consciousness. So I'll get to this more later.